Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Inspirate, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. We want to thank our in-studio sponsors for this beautiful studio, Enza Home. And this show is brought to you in collaboration with Musa, the Movement for a United South Africa. Today we have a very important topic, this around humanitarian aid. How do we operate with regards COVID and its impact on our society in a new way? Obviously, the pressures for humanitarian aid organizations have really become accentuated since COVID-19, since this pandemic has come to really impact our world. In studio, we have Mualima Amina Fakudi. Welcome, Mualima.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf Dinar. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I'm honored, in fact.
And online, we have somebody that's very well known in this particular field, social welfare, humanitarian aid, Brother Zainul Abidin Kaji from OCAF SA. Welcome, Zainul.
Jazakallah khairan, and assalamu alaikum to yourself, to Sister Amina, and also to all the viewers out there. And happy to be with you.
Walaikum salam. So let's start with this last couple of months, right? COVID has really shown the problems with the society we operate in. We speak about this glaring inequality, the haves living in this comfort, and then you have abject poverty. More so, what COVID has done, which is, I believe, something unique in that a lot of people that have been in comfortable positions have now somehow been affected. Either job losses, people don't have incomes or reduced incomes. And this must be affecting our society tremendously. Zainul, from your side, with the work that OCAF is doing, how are you finding it on the ground?
Well, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think that, like you say, the situation, it's common cause that we were, prior to the lockdown, prior to COVID, we were in quite a depressing situation in terms of our economy. And we've seen that livelihoods were already being affected. And COVID has just unveiled the mask that we've been wearing all the time about the glaring inequalities that are now quite visible to all of us. And I think that is a major cause for concern. On top of that, we've had all the looting that was taking place in the country. So that has really exacerbated the income levels, the wealth distribution in our country. And it has really openly and starkly revealed what this COVID has, and all the other shenanigans that we've had, and how that has affected the poorest of the poor. We see tremendous housing issues, tremendous poverty, tremendous job losses. We're seeing all of that. We're seeing health issues escalate as well. People who were really reluctant even to go to hospitals during this time. So I think it has affected everybody, even the medical profession. That people were really just even fearful of seeing a doctor. I know of a doctor who practices in Soweto, who says that he hasn't been there for the past 8 months. So looks like the impact, we haven't really even felt the real impact. Perhaps it's still too short a term to actually determine the real impact of COVID and the real impact of, the economic slowdown and all of that. But I think that's the general view. And, from an organizational perspective, I think, and the community, I think there has been a lot that was done. I don't know whether, currently, whether the momentum that started at the opening of the lockdown, if I may say, or at the start of the lockdown, the momentum of humanitarian aid and so forth was great. But it has, I think, slowed down a little bit. People are kind of not lethargic about it, but I think there's more and more concerns about poverty and, well, in a way, people have gone back to work as well. People, the economy is beginning to move. I know that from some people that own filling stations are saying that they're seeing a recovery in the petrol sales, which means that more people are on the roads. So which also means that the economy is also picking up. So there are all these different these variances that are at play. But I think the major concern is the major job losses that have taken place. At the moment, probably around 50% of the youth are unemployed. And, that is a major cause for concern going into the future. Food security may be another issue. So, I think we still need to be on our guard with a lot of issues going forward. I think that
yes, you mentioned quite a few issues, and I mean this is the reality on the ground, Mualima. But you mentioned this unveiling of the mask, and I think that's what maybe the most critical component. What COVID has brought to us is that perhaps we were very, or we chose to ignore a lot of these issues, these fractures in our society. And as Zainul says, this mask that has been unveiled, so you find that it touches you, right, as an individual. That when you see, people suffering, whether it may be from a health perspective, whether they don't have income, whether they've lost jobs, it galvanizes society to do something differently. How are you finding that, from your perspective, doing work in the communities, Mualima?
I find that people, as always, South Africans, act together in solidarity in times of crisis and in times of joy. Even in this crisis, South Africans were very willing to act together had they the resources to do so. When the Solidarity Fund was established, there was very high hope, especially in the interfaith community, that they could receive these food parcels and distribute them among the deserving people. Unfortunately, when the politicians came in and abused that, that showed very bad fault lines in society, and it exacerbated the plight of the needy, in that they had no one to turn to. People were kept indoors with their families for whom they couldn't provide. And they had to go and join those snaking queues, sometimes coming back empty-handed. That was very sad. It made me realize that in South Africa, we might not have material poverty. Maybe there's enough to go around for all people, but it is there for everybody's need, not for everybody's greed. Greed has crippled the ability to meet people's needs. As a result, the poor, though I don't like calling them the poor, I just like to call them the deserving. It is a blight on us as society to have people whom we call poor. How did it get there? Where were we when they got poor? What couldn't we do to raise their potential to be able to earn a living and live comfortably like all other people? Something is wrong. So this exacerbated the gap between the haves and the have-nots, more especially because the have-nots proved to need the worst of needs, food. No one can live without food. So I really believe COVID-19 is waking us up to a new way of doing life, of being a people, a nation. And we have to embrace that when we stand up post-COVID, inshallah.
You know, you're saying COVID has woken us up to doing things differently. Now, Zainul, on your side, I know when OCAF was started, those many years, I think it's now 20 years ago, OCAF was architected, initiated for this very reason, to do things differently. Give dignity, as Malima was talking about, give dignity to our people. How have you found it differently today, post-COVID, or whilst COVID is operating, in comparison to pre-COVID? Zainul?
Okay, I think our focus area is on a very important socio-economic pillar, and that is the whole concept of waqf,
right,
of Islamic endowments. Okay, this is an institution that is premised on Sharia. It is premised on rules that allow for long-term thinking, long-term planning, and also of mobilization of community resources, and allowing this civil society to be very, very active in long-term sustainable growth and development. So I think that our trajectory, what we've learned, is not something that just sprung up from nowhere. Of course, one needs to take into account the context in which we are living. And already when we started in year 2000, at that time already, when the thought processes were taking place about this institution, that we already knew what the situation was in the country. So we knew that the apartheid era had decimated societies, family structures were broken down, the various rules and laws that crippled society and decimated people, so and left people in abject poverty. So right through in terms of education, health, the gaps between the haves and the have-nots have been there. It's like I said earlier, now it is COVID has even unmasked it 20 years or 25 years later into our democracy. So
Zainul,
in terms of,
Zainul, I'm just going to sorry, you actually had a very, very important topic around this sustainability in terms of its initiation from an OCAF perspective. We just have to go to a break, and as soon as we get back, let's explore how you actually addressed these imbalances that came from apartheid through OCAF, and then explore it further in terms of how relevant is it in today's situation since COVID, which has actually created even more of this gap, immediately after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate, where we're here to inspire, empower, and enlighten you. We have this very, very important topic that we're discussing around humanitarian aid. Can we do things differently? Before we even get to that question, answering that question with my esteemed guests, who is from OCAF, South Africa, the CEO and founder, Zainul Abidin Kaji, as well as Mu'alima Amina Fakudi, who's doing tremendous work around interfaith work, as well as socio-economic development. Let's explore these fractures that was mentioned in the previous segment, these fractures in society. You mentioned food security being a key issue, Sister Amina. But Zainul, you were talking a little bit around some of these fractures, and let's continue from there. Zainul?
Yeah, so I mean, like I was saying, that you've had this during the apartheid era, pre-apartheid era, the colonial period, into the apartheid era, into the democratic era, and the stark reality is, of course, the wealth inequality in this country, the inequitable distribution of wealth, the monopolization of the economy, the problems of education, job reservation, the sort of unequal representation in companies into the corporate world and so forth as well. So I think there are lots of issues around it, and I think our major problem is how do we overcome all of this, the civil society can do so much, the state as an actor can do so much, but what is it that we need to do? Because we can come in from a perspective that says that civil society has a major role to play in fixing things up, okay? And we as one of those actors within civil society believe that we need different types of interventions, both short-term and long-term. We can't only look at, feeding people. We need to look at much more sustainable ways of upliftment, poverty elimination, not just alleviation, but how do we eradicate poverty? Have there been models that we've had in the past where we've seen a kind of egalitarian society where people were living almost equally, and we see that in previous times that in the way that economies were built around communities where people were all kind of living together, there was sufficient for everybody. So with this kind of economic model that we have currently, actually exacerbates this poverty and wealth gap. And South Africa, as we all know, has got the highest Gini index in the world. So the gaps between rich and poor are just, in almost like they seem insurmountable. But I think one way or the other, we need to look at this whole issue of this wealth gap, that needs to be mended and narrowed down so that there could be sufficient for everyone. And there is plenty for everyone in this country. There is no reason why people should be starving, or there should be malnutrition, or there should be lack of food, or, it's just unthinkable because there is plenty here in this country. And, that is what Allah has created for all of us. And He has told us that, there's enough and there's sufficient for everyone. But like Sister Amina said, greed has kind of overtaken need. We're in a system that only talks about growth and development and perpetual increases, rather than looking at an equilibrium in society, and where there's a transfer of wealth, redistribution of wealth through different mechanisms. And where, for example, in Islam, we have various mechanisms that actually promote redistribution. The Waqf is one aspect, Zakah is another aspect. Our wills and redistribution of wealth through our wills and wasiya is another way. So we have those kind of mechanisms, and we need to actually explore them and also perhaps propagate those ideas where people on the ground as communities can implement some of these mechanisms so as to create a new kind of economy. I think as long as we stuck with this current framework and this current model, I can't see us actually getting out of it actually.
Before we explore, and I think you brought in some really powerful points around this Waqf and ways of redistribution. But just before that, I just want to, before we jump to some of the solutions, look at this problem that you mentioned. And something that really, tears your heart when you look at countries like South Africa, you look at our neighboring countries, right? You look at the continent. You look at a continent that's blessed with some of the richest natural wealth in the world, right? Above the ground in terms of, you've got climates that are conducive to vegetation, to agriculture. You're looking at the natural wealth under the ground, yet we remain as the poorest continent on the globe. Sister Mwalima, how does that happen? Is it a fault of us, as everyone says, the corruption and so on, or is this, as Zainul alluded to, this economic system that's loaded for a few at the expense of many?
It is, Zainul is right. It is the problem of an economy that concentrates of the few at the expense of many. And this is the fault of colonization. It came and fragmented a society that was so intact, that was so cohesive, moving together and working together. There was nobody that was poor, and there was nobody that was better than the other. But colonization stratified people and built hierarchies among people and put itself, that is the colonizers, above everybody else. There's something that is called in psychology the anomie theory, in fact in criminology, where somebody sees somebody that has got better things than themselves and feel they too deserve to have those better things. We have now in action the anomie theory in South Africa, where the liberators of the people want to be like the people from whom they fought to be liberated. They now are that class. They've put themselves as that hierarchy, which is above all. That's why they call other people the poorest of the poor. The synergy, the social synergy of people has died. That needs to be revived if we are to be progressive and if we are to live in South Africa in peace. What needs to happen is we need to go back to the Constitution and recognize that the Constitution gives all people first an equal right to life. That in itself says every life is important and every life needs to be given equal opportunities. There will never be equal people, even though you might give people equal opportunities. But everybody will be operating equally according to their own gifts, talents, and inclinations. And when people are operating like that, it is an egalitarian society because everybody is doing what they can. But this cannot happen of its own. There has to be a strong government. That government must be able to work towards reconstructing society. A society that was ravaged, like how South African society was ravaged by apartheid, needs to be reconstructed We're not talking a race, we're talking about the entire South African society, all people living in South Africa, whatever race they are, because we are only one race, that is the human race. So all these people must be reconstructed, because apartheid ravaged all races. Reconstructed, regenerated, where the people have ethics reinstilled in them, understanding that the humanity of one person is as important as my own, or the humanity of one person is as important as the other person's. This comes from all the scriptures that love thy neighbor as thyself. So when we are reconstructed, when we are regenerated, then we can look at one another as equals and as people and as humans and work towards developing everybody else. Developing everybody else means everyone is given an opportunity to grow according to their talents and according to their abilities and capacities. And in developing them, we make sure that the ground is level. We all begin. And how do we begin? For instance, places like OCAF, places that do humanitarian aid, like the social development is doing humanitarian aid, they are doing humanitarian aid, but it's futile because it's given such that the person that receives has no dignity. He's just a receiver right through. Now, right now, where we stand, it has become clear to us that we have 12 million people, or was I hearing 12 million or 21, who are receiving the 350? Those people who are receiving the 350 are the people that demonstrate that this is the amount of development that is needed. So what needs to be done is these people must be given dignity. They must be educated to give back to society. For instance, we have a constitution that's lying latent and unused. It is redundant. It has all the value systems that can build a society. If all these people can be educated on how the constitution gives them a right to life, a right to dignity, a right to equality, a right to growth, a right to education, then these people are educated as they are given this these monies, and they are educated to go and educate communities, all communities. It doesn't matter which community, the nearest. If it is any racial community, they go there, these people, and develop these constitutional skills in these people to understand that wealth is for sharing. It is not for individuals.
Mualima, you're speaking about this, and Zainul was talking as well about this egalitarian society.
Yeah.
This that gives dignity and there's redistribution. We've come to the end of this segment. Let's explore this egalitarian society. What would it look like? How would we as actors in this society, each one of us, the president speaks about an inclusive economy, this that brings all facets of society together. How would we constitute this egalitarian society? Immediately after the break.
You inspire me to be the best. You inspire me to be the best.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Inspirate, where we're here to inspire, to empower and enlighten you. We thank our studio sponsors, Enza Home, in collaboration. Inspirate is doing this new socio-economic paradigm, the series theme, in collaboration with the Movement for a United South Africa, MUSA. Just before the break, what was spoken of was this egalitarian society. Brother Zainul Abidin Kaji from OCAF, South Africa, spoke about this egalitarian society. Zainul, I want to start with you. Let's explore this egalitarian society. What would it look like, and what needs to be done for each one of us to create this egalitarian society? Zainul?
Okay, I think we need to go to some fundamental concepts, and we have that in African culture, and we have it in Islamic culture. Okay, so we have the concept of ukhuwa in Islam, the brotherhood of humanity, and then we have this concept of Ubuntu in African culture. Okay, so these concepts speak very loudly about compassion, caring for one another, dignity, living, coexisting in harmony, looking after the interests of one another, caring for one another. So this is, where the way we are structured in our society, where you have, just look at our town planning. Our town planning is about where rich people live in a place, middle class people live in a place, poor people live in a place, and it's all stratified according to your living is stratified according to your income levels. Now, if you have an egalitarian society, then everybody should be living in similar circumstances. There shouldn't be, these ultra rich and ultra poor. There should be some measure. There will be a measure of people that are more blessed, I would say, than others. But that will all depend on people's abilities to work and produce and so forth as well. But I think it's the way our society is already structured. We still have, apartheid still lingers on. We still have group areas. We still have concentrations of people living in group areas. So, that hasn't actually changed. So, in order to get this egalitarian society, it really means a complete overhaul and restructure. We need to build new towns and cities that reflect this egalitarian society. It's not just about taking the existing and implanting ourselves in there and saying, well, look, you know what, we've those that were previously excluded now live in better homes, live in better areas, and all of that. It still does not solve the broader underlying issues. And those underlying issues are those that are really the worrying factor. And unless those are kind of addressed, we are not going to be, sitting in a situation where we can truly and sincerely believe in Ubuntu as part of our culture, ukhuwa as part of our culture, that we are able to see not only, in Islam, there's this concept of about the 40 neighbors, east, west, south, and north, the 40 neighbors, and going, your neighbor shouldn't be going hungry when you are eating. So, we have all these beautiful concepts, but they need to be implemented. And that goes across society. It's not only about Muslims, it's about humanity that have to, that this kind of economic system, a kind of social welfare society rather than a social welfare state that needs to be established. So in that way, one can actually sort of cross boundaries and start the social cohesion. And I mean, in South Africa, we have this particular issue about race and class. And those are the things that need to be broken down. So when we talk about dignity, then naturally, these things don't really matter anymore. We don't see color. We don't see class. We see people. We see humanity.
And isn't that what was shown to us by our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where, he created, Malima, this concept of non-racism, saying that no one is above everybody else. And we're talking at this stage in the trajectory of humanity, with all the advancements in technology, with all the advancements in every facet of our society, yet we still fractured, yet we still have this major class gap. Yes, there's issues which I'm hearing you talking about, legacies from colonialism, from apartheid. Yet we are blessed with this beautiful deen, that has taught us not to operate in this class manner. We live in a continent which has, as Brother Zainul was saying, the concept of Ubuntu, which is I am because of you, and you are because of me. Yet we still have these problems. So how would you see this egalitarian society that we talk about practically be implemented, be formulated, be created?
As a nation, we need to start afresh. We are damaged, again, let me say, from the legacy of apartheid, where we were put apart and taught to hate one another, despise one another. And that gave rise to us fearing one another. When we came out of that, and remember, that was taught, didactically taught. When you were in your school of your race, you knew that you couldn't cross over to the other school of the other race, no matter the physical proximity. So we need to teach constitutionality. We need to teach democracy. We need to talk to one another as a people. The thing is, we fear one another. The value system we're talking about now of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is only known to us Muslims. The value system of Ubuntu is only known to Africans. And the rest of the people treat it as stupidity because they think Africans are naive. They are not naive. They are people of Ubuntu. There are things they cannot do because it is just unlike a human being to do such a thing. We need to talk to one another, not talk about one another, and build in one another the understanding. When I look at our constitution, it's as if somebody was copying the value system from the Quran or from the scriptures, because all the scriptures focus on the same things, fundamentally the same things. The only thing that differs is practice, when someone has been indoctrinated to do things in a way that excludes others. We need to go right there. Government, society, business, academia, all people must come together and talk about being human, and talk about how to live with dignity, and talk about how to be equal. When we have done that, no one will be poor, because whatever anybody has will be shared with others, not in the form of giving, but in the form of working. For instance, let's say all these 12 million people who are taking now the grant are developed and taught how to teach the constitutional democratic values to the entire South African society. And a mechanism is provided that every South African is present to learn on specific days, whether it be on radio or whether it be in community halls or in conference centers or in hotels, but all South Africans learn there. Not learn as in the form of a teacher standing in front of you, but dialogue. We need to dialogue about ourselves. We need to talk about ourselves. It was ridiculous 2 years ago when we were talking about the white monopoly capital. We're going back to 1976. Come on. We need to learn now to talk about us, not us and them. We need to see human beings, whether they have or they have not. Because if they have, all the better for us. We have somebody who has in our midst, and we can employ their resources to better society. And government must work with society. Participative society is what is important. When society doesn't participate, then we get the likes that will use everything of the resources of the country for themselves. Like we're seeing now, the corruption, the looting. It happens because society is sitting back. Let's get society moving. Let's get society talking. inshallah.
You know, we're talking about this very important topic, humanitarian aid, how we can do things differently. And what has come across very strongly in this conversation is that it's about getting back to humanity. This that was taught to us by our Prophet, peace be upon him, this principles that Zainul spoke about around being in Africa, the Ubuntu principles. And this is what it's about. It's this reconstruction that Mualima mentioned, the reconstruction of the soul. Immediately after the break, let's discuss how this world will look like, this vision that we may have of a better life for all. Immediately after the break.
You inspire me to be the best. You inspire me to be the best.
Welcome back to Inspirate, the show that's here to inspire, empower, and enlighten you. We're on this theme for the season around ushering in a new socio-economic paradigm. COVID-19 has come in to ravage us, and how can we do things differently? Today's topic is around humanitarian aid. We have Zainul Abidin Kaji from OCAF South Africa, one of the founders and CEO, current CEO of OCAF. Zainul, the question I want to ask you, right, is if I were to give you, and we do this as in the norm on the show, if I were to give you a crystal ball and say to you, 5 years from now, Zainul, how would, given everything that we spoke about, this income inequality, the South Africa we have in one of the highest Gini coefficients, the fractures in our society, if I were to give you a crystal ball and says, in 5 years' time, how do you see a South Africa looking? How would you see it, Zainul?
1 second. I think I've just had a. I should have actually switched this off. Okay, so I think that's quite a loaded question. Okay, I think that 5 years is not really a long time, because to repair the damages that has taken place over the last centuries, I think can't be undone in 5 years. A lot could have been done in the past 25 years, but unfortunately, very little was done, and I think we're not going to brood over it. I think what we need to look at is what can be done from now onwards, going into the future. So I think that civil society has got a major role to play in mobilization, in mobilizing resources. I think I'm very pedantic about community-based resourcing. I believe that was the model, and even in earlier societies, that was a model that worked, where people in their own communities were able to look after themselves and were able to provide the sustenance, etc., that people needed. So if we were to build a new kind of society, obviously you'd need enabling legislation. I think that would be a given. And I don't think that we lack that kind of enabling legislation. Perhaps what needs to be done also is the smaller small business and micro business economies must open up. I think that perhaps some of these big businesses that employ and that that have taken away, really speaking, the small business, we need to reverse that. I know, for example, there was one town that I visited in America during December last year, and in that town there were no chain stores. It was only individual sole proprietors that were allowed to do business in that particular town. And that was like a bylaw of that particular town. So you wouldn't have a Checkers and a ShopRite, and you'd just have all small businesses in their little shops, and they would be trading. So you need that. You need I mean, transformation. If we're going to, as the saying goes, if you do what you did, you'll get what you got. So if we're going to be wanting to bring about change, then obviously we need to do things differently. We need a revolution of sorts in terms of the way our economy is run, the way wealth is actually distributed. Our educational systems need to be focused more on getting people to work rather than getting academic qualifications that half the time is a waste of time. That are not that do not enable people to actually get work and the quality and the experience that they require. So, and with the fourth industrial revolution, things are going to change. There's going to be, lots more job losses, and there'll be lots more redundancy of certain professions, and there'll be perhaps new avenues of employment as well, and new avenues of expertise. So I think 5 years is a short time, but I think in the 5 years, a lot of restructuring can be done so that in the next 10, 15, or 50 years, we can see the kind of transformation that we need in society. But of course, we really need a strong civil society. We need strong resources within civil society. Civil society initiated, managed, and controlled, versus state control.
No, thank you for that. As incumbent upon us as Muslims is to provide hope. We understand the problems in our society. It's come out very evident, and we're not going to be foolhardy to ignore these fractures. However, at the same time, we have to provide hope. Now, if I were to pass this crystal ball to you, Mualima, and give it to you and say, okay, there's a 5-year period. If we were sitting here today, 5 years from today, how would you see this country of ours, this continent, this world, how would you like it to look like in terms of what we've been speaking about?
I would look at our country first, which is South Africa, and I would build people. I would apply reconstruction and development of the soul. Like I said before, using the people, the 12 million people that are already receiving a grant from government, to be the foot soldiers that are talking to the entire South Africa. We build people, we become a nation. And we proudly say, according to our constitution, we, the people. Once that is done, then the people are given opportunities. I would number one, do away with the tender system. It is a cancer in our country. Then people would go back to their places, and on the ground, everybody gets an opportunity to apply themselves in ensuring that the values of the Constitution that they have imparted to society are lived values. Ubuntu would result from that. Government would implant into societies and grow them. In that, there'll be somebody who will be ensuring that the values of the Constitution are upheld and they are working within society. So the crime that way will be undone. The food, people will, as they receive that grant, be also given skills that they work and they double that grant. And those who can do gardens together. Those who can do security together. Everything. Those who can do plumbing together for the people. It is something that is done for the people. And the money comes straight from government to the people to do that. I would ensure that all people are a benefit to themselves and to others. That would build trust among all people. Then, as time goes on, the schools, people who are educated to be teachers would be teaching, all of them. Because teaching does not only happen at school, it happens all over. We have GBV in the country. Why is it happening? Because of ignorance. No human being would hit another human being if they were normal in their heads. We have child trafficking. We have rape, stuff like that. Human beings don't do stuff like that. Only when people are neglected and people have nothing to lose. People have lost the essence of being a human being. We need social cohesion, and it cannot happen unless people uphold the same value system, then they trust one another. Our country is badly managed. That's the problem we have. That's why we have a society as it is. Everybody looking out for themselves. We are out to destroy ourselves. Eventually we'll decimate ourselves. So we need a turnaround, inshallah.
Inshallah. We hearing the esteemed guests, Zainul Abidin Kaji from OCAF, South Africa, as well as Mualima Amina Fakudi, talking about this reconstruction, this egalitarian society, this that we taught that there is no such, well, we're all different, but we need to be seen through these differences and to find each other on a soul basis and working together, this inclusiveness that is being mentioned around us as a nation working together. We're about to end the show, but I want to just before we go, Zainul, I'll leave it with you, right? And then I'll come back to you, Sister Amina, is that if there's one thing, just one thing, let's assume today this whole show and the whole world comes to an end, and if there's one thing that you want to be left with all the viewers, if you want to leave one aspect for our viewers, if there's just one thing we can do to make this world a better place, what would that be? Zainul?
Okay, I think from the perspective that I come from the OCAF South Africa perspective, and I think a Quranic perspective as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, on the day of judgment, when we are in His court and we are now being questioned, and we'll be pleading there that, let us just go down one more time, just give us a chance, Ya Allah, to do some charity on earth. That is the plea that people will be making. So my plea, my one thing that I would say is that each one of us need to leave this legacy, this prophetic legacy of leaving behind something. Allah also tells us that He records everything that we do, but He's also going to record things that we leave behind. So whatever we leave behind is something that I would say that is the one thing that we all should do. What are you leaving behind? In terms of your wealth, in terms of your legacy, in terms of something that you have done that you can on the day of judgment say, Ya Allah, that is what I have done. That's in my record. That's the evidence. So that's my one thing.
Yes, leaving this legacy. We've got a few seconds, very briefly.
Professor.
What would be that one thing, Mualima?
I would give people back their dignity. I would ensure that each human being is able to operate according to their strength and grow there and be a benefit to society. Everyone is a benefit to society given a chance.
There we have it. Our guests have left us with two very important points. One, each one of us have to be making an impact, leaving a legacy. What can we do to leave that footprint on this earth, leave it a better place than when we came to this earth? And importantly, is for each one of us, whoever we are, whatever color we are, whatever faith we come from, is for each one of us to live with that dignity. Thank you, Zainul, from OCAF South Africa, for your esteemed insight. Thank you, Mualima Amina Fakuri. Thank you for blessing us with your presence. On that score, we hope to see you on many, many other shows as we continue the socio-economic paradigm and how we can do things differently since COVID. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.